Hello and welcome to another Astranti bite-sized video, and this time we're going to help you out if you're sitting your BA4 exam, because we're going to be talking about employer and employee duties. Yeah, that's right. I'm sure all of you have been employees and some of you have been employers, so I hope you're aware of the duties that you would have had to carry out when you were in those roles. And what we're going to be covering here is everything you're going to need to know about this information for your BA4 exams to make it nice and easy to get the grade that you want. So in this section, we're going to have a look at those duties that each party has. So let's first of all have a look at the duties that fall upon the employer. And their main duty really is that they are expected to take reasonable care of their employees. And what we're going to look at now is a variety of other duties, such as the one I've put on the screen, that kind of all work together for that main duty. So the first one, as you can see, is to provide a safe, healthy working environment. And that makes total sense, doesn't it? It's not right that an employee would have to be working in somewhere that was unsafe or that they hadn't trained to be in. We return to our Victorian era. We no longer can have people working up chimneys or making matches with poisonous chemicals without any protection. It's up to the employer to make sure the environment is safe for their employees. They are also expected to pay a reasonable remuneration. Now, what does that mean? Well, it means that they have to pay a reasonable amount of money for the services or the skills that their employee is using for the job. Now, in the UK, if we return to UK law, in fact, in 1999, the National Minimum Wage Act was put into effect, making it illegal to pay workers of a certain age less than the national standard. So that's why they're expected to pay a reasonable remuneration. Now we move on to provide an itemized pay slip. So here it's quite a simple one. This is quite bureaucratic and administrative. It's important that the employer provides their employee with up-to-date and valid information of how they were paid and what they were paid and when they were paid. And of course, these slips are then used by the employee for many other purposes in their life, such as getting mortgages or loans and things like that. Then we move on to the employer must treat the employee with mutual respect and behave reasonably and responsibly towards them. So, for instance, we've seen a lot of incidents in the news, really, in the entertainment industry of allegations of sexual harassment, haven't we? Now, a responsible boss would have heard the claims of sexual harassment and made sure they went down the proper grievance process so the victim could air their grievances and the accused could be disciplined if necessary. Now, of course, an irresponsible boss would just kind of brush allegations under the carpet. And then we move on to indemnify the employee against any losses or expenses as occurred as an employee. So they must reimburse any losses the employee makes in the line of their work. So there we go. There we've seen the duties of the employer towards the employee. But now we move on. And just like the employee has a main duty towards the employee too has a main duty towards the employer. In this case, it's not about taking reasonable care, but it's to provide a faithful service to their employer. So there we go, that's the main duty. Now again, we'll see lots of these little side duties, these sub-duties also kind of all work together to kind of create that faithful service. But that's the main duty. But number one of these is to obey the employer's orders. But of course, those orders have to be safe. They can't make you climb up a chimney, even if they order you to, because it's just not safe. They've got to be lawful. They can't make you climb down someone else's chimney, because that's illegal. And reasonable. They can't make you climb up a chimney if you're an accountant. It's not your job, but if you are a roofer, then perhaps they could make you climb up a chimney. Then we move on to exercise reasonable skill and competence in their job. So, of course, the employees have to have made a claim, haven't they, on their CV or their interviews. And then it's their duty to make sure they act using those skills, using the work ethic, using their claims to do the best job that they can. And they must also protect confidential information. Now, all industries have some form of confidential information, whether you're a teacher with information about your students or a business with information about your products. All of these are confidential things that, as an employee, you have a duty to keep confidential. You should also provide a personal service. So if you've been employed, it's not really allowed to then employ someone else to do your role for you. So there's no way you can delegate your work to an outsider unless, of course, your employer agrees or thinks it's a good idea. An employee should also act with fidelity, and all that means really is that an employee shouldn't work for a rival employer. That makes sense, doesn't it? Because it also kind of ties in with the idea of confidential information. If you're working with a rival, you might share some of that confidential information. And if you're working with a rival, then what are you doing in that company? How are you helping them? Because you're helping them achieve their objectives, which is to kind of beat the competition. So how can you act truthfully and faithfully in both roles? We're going back to our main duty there, aren't we? How can you be faithful if you're working for the competitor? And finally, to act in good faith. So they shouldn't be accepting bribes, shouldn't be taking any money, shouldn't be going outside the terms of their agreement, should be open and honest. So there we go. They're the duties of both the employer and the employee. We've got the main duties of both, and you can kind of see, can't you, the little duties all add up to that main duty. We're going to have a look at an example now. Let's go down to this pink circle. And what we're going to look at is another UK case, this time from 1951. And it's Mr. Reading. It's not the city. It's a Mr. Reading versus the Attorney General. And Mr. Reading was an army sergeant working in North Africa. Now, Mr. Reading was paid by smugglers to ride in their lorries in his uniform so the smugglers wouldn't get searched by the British Army because they'd assumed everything was legal and above board. Now, Mr. Reading was caught, so the UK government took the money that he was paid and put him in prison. Now, Mr. Reading said that they should return the money that he had been paid, but the House of Lords refused his claim. Now, one of the reasons that the House of Lords refused his claim was that he had broken his position of trust or faith as an employee. Because obviously, as we just saw, he wasn't acting in good faith. He took a bribe. Almost acting for the competition in a way, because they're opposing forces. And so he'd broken the contract that he'd made with his employer, who were the British Army. So there we go. There's an example for you, and that's the employer and employee duties. But a big, important warning sign, it should be noted that if either party seriously breaches their contract of employment, the injured party then could say, well, hold on a minute, I'm going to treat this contract as discharged because you've broken the terms of the contract, and they could claim for damages for the breach of contract. So that's something to bear in mind. It's not just a matter of honesty or good conduct. Breaching the contract can result in legal matters. So there we go. Thank you very much for listening today. I hope that you feel confident in what an employee and what an employer is responsible for, and I hope that you feel able to be able to apply that, if necessary, in your BA4 exam. And of course, if you want any more help, please like these videos, subscribe to this channel, and we'll keep these videos coming. And above all, good luck with your exam.